I'm being frank and honest. Yeah, no, I was a destructive force in a lot of people's lives. And I think a typical, alcoholic mindset or whatever it is, I was manipulative enough to bring people along and rope them in. My gravitational pull would pull people in, and then I would lead people on, the self-destructive part of what I was doing. The mistaken belief that, well, maybe if I can just have success.
Yeah, if I succeed, people will like me.
Well, these feelings will stop.
Okay.
I can prove myself. Maybe I'm not worthless and useless and stupid and all the things I was telling myself. I just can have financial success. I'll feel better. I learned the hard way that that's not the case.
Right.
You can have all the financial success in the world and still go to sleep wishing you would die.
Right. Well, I think this is good for people to hear, because you're a successful entrepreneur, and on the outside, you had a lot of good things going on. Sure. So how has your perspective on business and leadership changed since you stopped drinking?
It's a good question, I think.
Hello and welcome to I Love Being Sober, where we dive deep into the stories that shape our lives and explore the journey of sobriety. I'm your host, Tim Westbrook, and today we're joined by Matt Waltz, a seasoned entrepreneur with a passion for creating meaningful change in both the business world and community at large. From his early days founding Waltz Construction to his impactful work at New Freedom, Matt's journey is one of innovation, leadership, and personal transformation. Recently, he celebrated 15 months of sobriety, and Matt's here to share his story of recovery, resilience, and renewal. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. So great to be with you.
Yeah, so glad that you're here. And we've gotten connected a couple of times through a couple of people, and I've known your name over the years, and I'm glad that we finally sat down at the Henry about a month ago and really got to chat, and I got to know more about you, and I'm really glad to have you here on this show.
Yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed our conversation last time too.
Yeah, likewise. So let's start from the beginning. Can you tell us about your roots and what led you to becoming an entrepreneur?
Gosh, I kind of feel like I need to back up a little bit. So if I put you to sleep, I'll speed up. Start
wherever you want to start, and it's going to be perfect.
So I guess I'll go back to my childhood. Kind of a tumultuous. My family always seemed to be in financial trouble, right? So I kind of, from an early age, there was this anxiety about money and never having enough, and really wanting to not feel that way as I grew up. And so took a fairly traditional route, went to college, got an engineering degree. Thought a safe route would be go get hired by a big company.
Right.
So
engineering, I wouldn't have guessed.
Yeah. Well, the School of Construction, to be specific, it's in the engineering school.
Okay.
And so, some people think, construction, do you learn how to use a power saw and all that? It was very, very engineering heavy. 3 semesters of calculus, 3 semesters of physics.
Yeah, I was a civil engineering major for 1 quarter.
Yep.
And then I was like, I'm done.
Really, really challenging stuff for me.
Right.
So I went to work for a big company, multi-billion dollar, 150-year-old company. And I thought, great, this is going to provide stability and safety and everything. And then what I learned over the course of about 10 years is it really doesn't. A big company, I think that people mistakenly believe that a big company provides a bunch of security, but the truth is, they're just like everyone else. When times get tough, they have to make tough decisions. You might get cut. So I sort of had this realization, and I kind of had a little bit of a mini midlife crisis where I just decided I have to be in control of my own destiny. And there were some problems with that we can get into in a little while. But so I just decided, I kind of had this panic attack where I said, man, I've been working for this company for 10 years. And if times get tough, they could cut me loose. And I mistakenly thought originally, I'll work here for the rest of my life. It's and it is a great company. It still is to this day. But I just had this internal, freak out where I go, no, I need to be in charge of my own destiny. So that's what drove me to open and start Waltz Construction about 22 years ago.
And how old were you?
Let's see, if I'm 52 now, I think the math works out that I was about 30.
So no entrepreneurial ventures as a kid, or
Well, yes.
I mean, like,
I was
sell, like selling candy or putting up a.
I wish it was candy, but yes, entrepreneurial venture started early with me.
Okay.
And yes, I was into drugs and selling drugs. And
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess if we certainly some of that entrepreneurial behavior,
Right.
as misguided as it was, yes, that was kind of in me early.
Right. I mean, that's why I'm like, wait a second, because usually entrepreneurs, it's kind of a personality.
I think,
and a lot of time, I think, I don't know, this is just my opinion, my perception based upon people that I know that are entrepreneurs. It starts young, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a business, but it can be selling drugs. It can be, I mean, selling, you buy and you sell for a profit, and you got customers.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's part of it. Another part of this was working for a big company. What I mistakenly believed is, well, this is a big successful company. Everyone must be organized and effective, and they execute well, and they have all these skills. And what I learned was that wasn't the case. I came in my peers when I first came in, like, and there were a lot of good people, but it was like, people aren't overwhelming me with their professionalism and their stick-to-itiveness and then I would get a promotion. Go, okay, this must be the level where they're really high quality people are. And I'd look around again and go, no, not really. Yeah. And so I kept getting promoted and kept having this realization. And so at some point I was right below the C-suite. Yeah. And I looked around and I go, oh, what seems to be true is that there aren't an overwhelming amount of people who are knocking the cover off the ball. Right. And so that also gave me the courage to say, okay, well, maybe if I really put something in, maybe I can do this. Yeah.
I can do this.
One of the realizations that I had.
Okay. And then, so how long from when you thought, man, I could do this, to when you actually pulled the trigger? Like, what events led up to you actually pulling the trigger and starting Waltz Construction? Yeah.
So what really kind of kicked me out the door was my boss at this construction company, who I have immense respect for. He was like a true mentor and someone I really looked up to and respected and had a great relationship with. Some things kind of got sideways, and he left the company because he didn't agree with some of the decisions that were being made. Okay. And then there was kind of a really bad leader at the top, and there was no one in between me and the bad leader. Okay. So I was kind of having to face some music with, maybe not a full sociopath, but like really some personality disorder kind of stuff. So at that point I was like, I got to get out of here. I just watched a man I really respect and admire leave because he didn't agree with what was happening. And so that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And I said, I've got to just go do my own thing. Right. Okay. And then, so what, like, how did you do it? How long did it take? Because you made the decision. Yep. And then how long from when you made the decision to when you actually left? So another interesting thing happened to me. I intended to leave. I went to the company, the regional manager and the owners, and I said, hey, listen, it's been great working here. I'm going to start my own thing. I just want to be upfront with you and tell you this is what's going on. And what I didn't expect to happen. They said, we understand. Start your business, but finish what you're doing for us. So they allowed me to start my own business and continue working for them for about 9 months. Okay. So that was a real gift. Oh, yeah. That I didn't expect. Yeah. And I guess, one of the lessons for me was like, be upfront and transparent with people. And sometimes good things will happen. Yeah. I mean, it's, I love the line from a guy named Dave Kekich. He says, life is easy if you live it the hard way and hard if you live it the easy way. Yep. And those hard conversations, because if you don't have the hard conversation, then you're holding it in. And that's when it leads to, feeling restless, irritable, and discontent. Yep. So good for you on I didn't learn how to have those hard conversations until I had been in recovery for a long time. So that's great. Okay. So and then how quickly did Waltz Construction take off? It was a couple of years. And honestly, it's funny thinking back on it. But the first thing we did, we went to Lowe's Home Improvement and got a contract installing doors and windows. Okay. So literally, I was working for this big company during the week. On the weekends, me and my partner would go out. Yeah. We were installing doors and windows. We were just trying to generate some cash flow to sort of build up, at least a little bit of credit history. And what I hoped was going to be true was some of the clients that I had developed working for this big company eventually would give us a shot. And Arizona State was one of those clients.
Okay.
And eventually after, watching us struggle for a year and a half, 2 years, they finally gave us our first job.
Nice.
And so one of the things I tell people who are entrepreneurial minded or thinking about going out on their own is what you need to do is capitalize on opportunities when they present themselves. Because it would have been really easy to go, we're not ready for ASU. I'm installing security doors on the weekend. Right? I'm not ready for this. So it would have been so easy to find ways to say no. And I tell people, find a way to say yes.
Yeah.
Find a way to say yes to the opportunity. And then just don't take no for an answer and try to figure it out.
Well, it's kind of like you were thinking about that big company and you're thinking about the guys up at the top, and it's like, I could do this. It's the same thing with taking a big job with ASU.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what? Who else is going to take the job? Somebody else is just like you.
Yep.
And so that's great.
And that's one of the things, again, I love talking to young entrepreneurs or people who are thinking about doing things like, yeah, it's scary. And you think, I like to bring things back to sports a lot. I grew up wrestling.
Okay.
And it's like before a wrestle match, you're looking across at your opponent and thinking, God, we can't be the same weight. That guy looks huge. He's going to kill me.
Yeah.
And you have the courage to step on the mat and you find out, oh, he is just like me. Yeah. And I think opportunities in life, they seem so daunting and scary. And when you step out on the mat with these challenges, you go, okay, all right, I can do this. Yeah, it's scary. But when you get in the fight, when you get in the wrestle match, when you get in the game, you find out you're better than maybe you gave yourself credit for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the traits of an entrepreneur is just like saying yes. And you've got your comfort zone, and your comfort zone, every time you take a step outside of your comfort zone grows. Yep. And so taking on that big job was great, and probably led to a lot of other great things as well, obviously.
Yeah. And again, just being ready for the opportunity and capitalizing. I think that's one of the tenets that makes good business owners, good entrepreneurs successful. Finding a way to say yes.
Well, and I think also it's having confidence. Believe, it's like whatever. If you believe you can, then you can. Whatever you believe. If you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right.
Yep.
And it's like it's not rocket science. I mean, you can do it. And figuring out, it's like you've lived life, you've gotten where you are, and so yeah, that's a good lesson. So moving forward to a more challenging time, you've been open about your journey towards sobriety. What was the turning point that led you to decide that you wanted to stop drinking?
It was probably about 8 years ago that I went through a terrible alcohol withdrawal.
Okay,
and thought and probably almost died. And it was a terrifying experience. I don't know if you've ever been through alcohol withdrawals or not, but and I didn't know what it was. To make matters worse,
right? I
didn't know what it was. I just knew, I had this, panic attack type situation. My blood pressure was at 200s over high 190s. My heart rate was 190, and just going through this terrifying experience and not understanding what it was. I came to the realization when after going, taking a ride in an ambulance to the hospital and having that experience, and then finally figuring out, oh my God, that was an alcohol withdrawal.
Yeah.
I was faced with this reality, like if I don't do something different, it's probably unlikely I'm going to survive.
Right.
And that's a really stark realization. And so it forced me to start the internal dialogue about, well, what am I going to do? I don't know. Not really knowing anything about how to do it, just starting from zero.
Okay, so let's talk about your journey. So about 8 years ago, and how long had you stopped drinking before that actually happened?
It was less than 24 to 36 hours.
Wow, so you were drinking a lot.
Oh yeah, no. Since when I look back on things, since I was 11 or 12,
right,
I probably haven't gone more than 30 days without alcohol.
Right.
Over that time period of my life.
Okay.
So a long time.
Okay.
And just ramping up. I mean, there was a long time, maybe a decade or more, where I wanted to stop every morning. Go, okay, I'm going to stop today. And then by noon, maybe not. And then by 3 o'clock, having a drink.
Yeah. Because it's the solution.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you want to feel better.
Yeah. You want to not feel whatever you're feeling.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So
I'm sure you're doing the math. You're going, wait a minute. 15 months of sobriety, eight years ago.
That's why I'm saying let's talk about your journey through sobriety, because I mean you're like most people. They don't say, "Hey, I want to stop and stop." Most people, it's sobriety is a journey, and it's and you know people get sober, and then they go back out, and then they get sober, and then they go back out, and it's so starting and stopping is part of the journey for most people.
Yeah.
So you decide. So how long did you stay sober the first time you tried?
Maybe a couple of weeks.
Okay.
You know, literally I was in this balancing act of, I don't want to go through withdrawals again. Mm-hmm. So I need to manage my drinking so I don't drink enough that it's going to trigger the withdrawals again. Uh-huh. I went through it again. You know, my drinking ramped back up. So I went through the withdrawals again, maybe a year and a half later.
Okay.
You know, had to, you know, I get introduced to a doctor who was, you know, kind of in that detox world. Mm-hmm. So, you know, had a doctor, you know, dose me through the detox.
Yep.
And then we'll start over. And maybe I would go a month. Then after that, maybe a month at a time. Mm-hmm. But still trying to walk this tightrope of, okay, I need to drink because, you know, part of it goes, I don't know how to enjoy life without this. So do I become a hermit and stay home and be, you know, like that's a self-talk that's happening. Mm-hmm. Do I become a hermit and just stay home because social interaction is now totally awkward and I don't like it? So do I stay at home or do I just drink a little bit and try to manage that? So, you know, doing this juggling act, trying to drink enough so I can enjoy myself, not drink so much I get withdrawals again. That was a really tough place to be.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I didn't intentionally, I remember my now ex-wife, then wife, I remember she took me to go see a counselor and I thought it was marriage counseling. And then we start talking about my drinking and I'm like, why are we talking about my drinking? And this was about a year before I actually got sober. And she said, well, you know, could you stop? And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, but I don't want to. And then she said, well, can you stop for 90 days? And I'm like, sure, no problem. Mm-hmm. So I stopped for 90 days, but then I wasn't really stopping. And then I started drinking again. And she's like, oh, you started drinking again. I'm like, well, yeah, I agreed to 90 days. And that was it. But then this is where she said, well, why don't we do some controlled drinking? And the controlled drinking we agreed on was like 2 to 4 drinks, like 2 times a week or something like that. And that's hard because the next thing you know, the 2 to 4 drinks, those drinks are pretty big.
Yeah.
You know, so it's
or
like,
maybe you're having a couple before the 2 to 4. That's public, right? You know, like
well, the 2 to 4 drinks, it's like an 18% beer that's like 40 ounces. That's what's considered one drink to me. But it's just I've seen people try to do it. Controlled drinking, just it's so hard to do. Anything that you try to do in moderation, in my opinion, it's just harder to do. It's either you do it or you don't do it.
Yeah.
Is much easier because it's a black or white decision.
Yep.
It's not, let me think, where am I at? I could probably do a little bit more.
Yep. So as I'm trying to, work this balancing act, this juggling act, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then, one of the people in my life who I really respect and admire, Steve Judson.
Yes.
You know Steve.
Yep.
And so I'd known Steve since we were kids.
Okay.
Right. Like he was the terrifying guy in the neighborhood at an early age. So I watched him, through his life and his, and at some point Steve really got himself together. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what is going on?
Right.
What are you doing?
Right.
So, I asked him, can we get together? And we got together and he told me, one of the things is he was, using psychedelics, ayahuasca, and that was one of the things, he was pretty open about that on social media. And so I started asking about this. And so one of the things I tried to, reset, get my life together, I went on a couple of ayahuasca retreats.
Okay.
And that was, terrifying, amazing. There was pros and cons in a big way to that. But that was one of the things that kind of helped me make some realizations.
Okay.
You know, I don't know if you've had any experiences like that.
I've had experiences.
Yeah.
And so my experience and what I know is that it brings clarity, a different perspective. So tell me about your so when you went into when was the first ayahuasca journey?
Oh man. Have you ever heard of this thing called the coronavirus?
The coronavirus?
Yeah.
Yes.
You heard of that, right?
I've heard of it. Yeah. I've heard of it.
It seems like ever since that coronavirus happened, my ability to tell time has just disappeared.
Okay.
It's like there's this time warp during the coronavirus days.
Well, you know
So
what?
I'm like,
no, I think it's as we get older.
Okay.
This somebody told me this the other day or a couple weeks ago. I've never heard this before. So when you're 3 years old, there's only 3 years of life. Right. So 1 year is like 33% of your life, 33% of your memories.
Right.
And when you're 50, 1 year of your life is only 2% of your memories. So therefore, as you continue getting older, 1 year becomes less of a less significant. And I'd never heard that before. And that kind of makes sense. Yep. So, I mean, you could say it's COVID, or you could just say we're getting older. And as we get older, time just goes faster. And it's like, I don't know, a year ago, 2 years ago.
So I think it was probably 6 years ago, the first ayahuasca
It was
retreat
before COVID.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the second one was probably 4 years.
Okay. So what happened? Like, what were your realizations in that first experience?
The first experience,
if you remember.
Yeah, no, the first experience was pretty chaotic, and I think it wasn't as crystal clear. It was I felt like a little bit of a reset. I felt, there's a lot of things going on I need to get a handle on. Nothing really, distilled down that really made sense to me.
Okay.
The second one, it really did. And I don't know, for me, like psychedelics, ayahuasca especially, it's like, they say, don't come in with expectations. Well, of course I did.
Yeah.
And my expectations couldn't have been further from what I actually experienced.
Yes.
Right. And so the second one, gosh, it was crazy. One of the major realizations was that fear was a huge driver for me.
Okay.
And I had no idea that was true. In fact, I would have vehemently denied that if someone had told me that. But in this experience, I realized the majority of my life has been centered around fear. I started
fear was the motivator.
Yeah. Started wrestling and fighting and jujitsu and all that because I was scared I was weak. Start my own business because I'm scared of not being in control. Like the list just went on. And so that was a really powerful realization. And the second one was that I needed to forgive myself. And I was like, wait a minute. No, have you heard of this book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It?
I have. I have not read it, but I've heard of it.
So I read that book, and it's the process of how do you forgive yourself? How do you love yourself?
Okay.
So I went through this process, and I thought, nope, check that box. But according to ayahuasca, I had not done that. So those two things were just blew my mind. And that was really helpful for me to kind of take some of the next steps in my life improvement.
Right. Yeah, it's a psychedelic like ayahuasca. My experience is it completely strips you of your ego. It's like you want some answers, like these are the answers.
Yeah,
and it's like a different perspective and a different some things come to light. And as an alcoholic and a drug addict in recovery, some people still have the opinion. It's like, oh, you're just getting high. It's like it's not like it's not like that. Like you're not going to go and do an ayahuasca journey to go have fun with your buddies. Like you like to your point, you had expectations. You have no clue what's going to happen and what you're going to get from it.
And that ego, dissolving of the ego, that's terrifying for me. I mean, really terrifying. I mean, people ask me like, hey, would you recommend me doing that? And I always tell people, look, I would not approach this lightly. If you really have an objective, if you really feel like you need some clarity or reset, I would maybe you should, investigate that. But as like a tourist or just, hey, I want to check this out, I would not recommend that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I appreciate about psychedelics and the psychedelic community. my experience anyways, is if you compare psychedelics to drugs, alcohol, cocaine, people that are promoting, it's like, hey, go ahead, like take a drink. Come on, buddy, take a drink. Mm-hmm. Do another line. And that's kind of where the drugs, whereas with psychedelics, my experience, people that are in that community are like, I don't know, man, if you're called to it. And it's much different. There's no, in my experience, there's no peer pressure. It's always if you're called to it. Yeah. And if there's, that's kind of been my experience with it, which is I think it's good. I think it's better because people get to make the decision when and if they feel called to it. Yeah. If they want to dig deeper, if they want to strip away their ego. You're not going to do it to have a good time.
Yeah, it's no joke.
Yeah. Can be beautiful on the other side.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're but then you continued drinking after that. So so tell me like kind of what was the actual turning point. So you did your couple of ayahuasca journeys, and then you got some clarity, and then what?
And then still, that juggling act of, I want to be social, I want to have a good time, trying to manage, the social aspect of drinking. Again, don't get too into it because I don't want to go through withdrawals. Like it was like a constant worry of how to do that. And so, actually it was about New Freedom.
Yes.
And so there were some struggles that happened in the behavioral health world.
Okay.
And this was, just about 15 months ago.
Okay.
And when this happened in the behavioral health world, I said, okay, I'm putting this away because I need to be as clear-headed, as focused, and as professional as I can possibly muster. And so I'm putting this away for that. That's what I told what I told myself. Mm-hmm. And so, and then the deal, you ever make a deal with yourself? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the deal was, until this issue is completely resolved, I'm not drinking again.
Okay.
And that was the meeting of the minds I had with myself, so to speak.
And you've been able to hold to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not been, it's not been easy. There's plenty. And so maybe this is true for a lot of people. For me, I'd just been using alcohol to manage my stress.
It's the solution. Yeah. That's what alcohol is. It's the solution to the pain, and it's a good solution. Yeah. It actually makes you feel better every time. You know what you're going to get.
Yep. And so, I told myself, stress doesn't bother me.
Right.
I can sleep under Damocles' sword, and it doesn't bother me. Like I can pile the stress on. It doesn't.
Right.
There are some people in the world who seem to be able to manage stress, and I thought I was one of those people.
Right.
And then the interesting thing that I found when I finally really stripped away the alcohol is that wasn't true. Like, I really do worry a lot. I have a lot of anxiety, and now there's no escape. Mm-hmm. So one of the most challenging things for me has been finding a way to weather the storm when things get stressful and I'm filled with anxiety, and there's nowhere to go away from it. So I think it's made me stronger because, to go back to the psychedelic world, people call, ayahuasca or whatever, sitting, we're going to sit with this reality. So I feel like I find myself sitting with the stress and anxiety and having to just get stronger mentally, emotionally to handle it.
Right. I think there's two things I'm thinking about. One is you said earlier, what am I going to do? If I don't drink, what am I going to do? How am I going to have fun? And that's the lifestyle. The lifestyle is you drink to have fun. You drink, and I don't know about you, probably for you as well, but for me, everything revolved around drinking and doing drugs. You're going to a game, you're going to dinner, you're going to the movies, you're going to a concert, you're going to happy hour
with the coworkers,
like everything it's alcohol, drugs are always part of the equation. So when I got sober, I really dove into the 12-step community, and that was kind of, I went to meetings, I hung out with people that were in recovery. I completely changed. It's like new eating habits, new sleeping habits, new exercise habits. I pray and meditate. I do a gratitude list. I did all these things to completely change the way that I lived. And that was my approach. That was what worked for me. And then for you, tell me about, and I want to talk about your, like what you do today to manage your stress, because you still have the stress. And what do you do? You used to have a drink, but what do you do today instead?
So where should I start?
I know I just threw a lot at you.
That's okay. No, I like it. It's so I guess what do we, maybe the first thing is, well, what do I do? How do I enjoy, what am I doing to enjoy things? And I think what I'm trying to do is, I just really enjoy having conversations with people, so I've really started to enjoy that. And even maybe before a social event, I'll think about who's going to be there. Like, oh, I can't wait to talk to this person about that or this person about this. And so, that's been a fun, exchange of, all right, well, I'm not drinking and partying, but I'm going to have these deep conversations about interesting things.
Well, and I mean, talking about speaking to the ego. So my experience for me, it was more about ego. It was more about sounding good and looking good pre-sobriety. And in sobriety, the conversations were much better. Yeah. They are much better. They're deeper. There's more to them. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's almost, and I keep coming back to this. I watched Mike Tyson talk with a guy, Tucker Carlson, on a show a while back.
Okay.
And I knew this in my gut. I couldn't articulate it, but what Mike Tyson said was, when someone insults me and I think I'm somebody, I get upset. But then when I remember I'm nobody, it doesn't bother me.
Right.
And so I think part of the shift for me has been like when I was drinking, like I kind of needed to be somebody more.
Yeah.
And now that I'm not, I'm fine being nobody. And being nobody is a really comfortable position for me. Mm-hmm. It's fine. Like if I need to sweep, if I take out the garbage or sweep the floor, I find myself, I can tell when I'm getting mentally unwell.
Right.
When I start needing to be noticed and need to be.
Yeah, it happens. It's kind of like that journey, right?
Like something's going. And so when I find myself not needing to be acknowledged or, I'm fine being nobody. Mm-hmm. I know that's when things are going right for me. What's
that feeling like?
Of being nobody?
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's a calming, centering feeling. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, I'm happy.
To get a free copy of the 12-step guide that I created for you, click on the link in the description below.
Like I said, sweeping the floor or taking out the trash.
Doesn't matter.
Or doing yard work where no one notices what I'm doing.
Right.
And I'm okay with that.
Right.
It's a feeling of stripping away all the BS and just being comfortable in my own skin, doing whatever it is I'm doing. The inane, the boring, that's a very comfortable place for me to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that's when the ego is not there and the ego comes back occasionally. Yeah. I understand. Okay. So
what was the second part of that question?
So what do you do when you do feel, stressed out, overwhelmed, in fear? The fear comes back. Yep. Before you used to be able to take a drink to make yourself feel better. What do you do today instead?
There's a couple of things. One is, I try to ascertain, do I have any control over this? Right. Mm-hmm. If the answer is no, okay, I'm going to let it go because I have no control.
Right.
If the answer is there are some things I have control over, well, I'm going to focus on those things. I'm going to do what I can. I want to challenge myself not to just throw up my hands and go, well, it's all in God's hands. I'm not going to that doesn't feel like the right, I need to do my work. Right. I need to be intelligent. I need to focus. I need to do the work. Mm-hmm. But also if it truly is out of my control, then I just need to go, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. The second thing is, and I think, I don't know that I've heard a lot of people talk about this, but one of the things I've realized, it's like, sometimes stress is important. If you're stressed about financial things in your business and those things are going bad, well, maybe you should be stressed about that. Mm-hmm. And maybe you need to focus on, okay, how do I solve this problem that's causing me stress? Mm-hmm. I think sometimes people might go, I'm just going to let it go. I'm not going to be anxious. Well, sometimes anxiety can be a trigger call to action. Mm-hmm. And so I try to call myself to action and solve some of the things that are causing the anxiety. Unless it's one of those things, like I said, if I have no control over it, then I have to let it go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like the Serenity Prayer. grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can. So taking action when you can take action, but then you do the best you can. And after you take action, it's like, okay, now it's in God's hands and God's in control. There's a song that a woman wrote. It's called Intend and Surrender by a woman named Tara Davina. The first words of the song, everything that happens is the best thing that can happen. And everything that happened is the only thing that can happen. And I really like the words. It's not just, hey, it's God's will. It's like, this happened and it's the best thing that can happen. We've got these issues that I'm dealing with and they're the best thing that can happen. Yeah. And when I have that mindset of everything that happens is the best thing that can happen, because otherwise I'm trying to change. Well, if this would have happened, well, if this didn't happen, and I'm putting energy into something I cannot change. Yeah. And if I'm in acceptance, acceptance is the answer to all my problems. It's one of the sayings from AA that I go back to. It's like all the sayings.
I like that.
So what do you do to feel better? And so, like, for example, this is what I mean. And you gave me some good answers, but you're still like, I know for me, I'm feeling restless, irritable, discontent. I'm a little stressed out. I can go do a cold plunge. I can go for a run. I can go for a hike. I can go for a bike ride. I can go do CrossFit. I can do yoga. I can do breath work. There's a lot of things I can do. And I know that when I can do a gratitude list, when I do a gratitude, if I'm grateful, then I know I know I'm feeling better. So what are some of the things that you can do to make you feel better?
Sure. And I'll preface this by saying I've been incredibly lucky in life in so many ways. And one of the ways I've been incredibly lucky is I've got, a group of brothers, so I, wrestling and jiu-jitsu and boxing for a long time. I've got some really close friends who do that. Mm-hmm. So at my house, I've got like a wrestling room in the basement.
Okay.
So 3 or 4 days a week, I've got 6 to 12 guys who come over and we do some wrestling, do some boxing, do some jiu-jitsu. We then get in the sauna and the cold plunge afterwards.
Okay.
So it's 90 minutes of intense exercise, but also really riveting conversation and, brotherhood. Like I don't know how else to describe it other than that. Uh-huh. So that's a huge thing for me. Mm-hmm. And then, one of my companies, Waltz Construction Development, we also, have agreed that in the afternoon there's a workout that anyone can be a part of.
Okay.
So at the company culture, at the end of the day, everyone gets together, we do a workout, so that's another big stress release opportunity for me.
Right.
And then small things like I find like on the weekend or in the evenings, like going out and spending an hour and a half, 2 hours cleaning my garage is very therapeutic for me. Mm-hmm. It feels like there's some production, there's some ego stripping, doing your own work.
Yeah.
There's something therapeutic about that. I've got dogs, so my dogs, they're my new children, kind of. Since my boys are grown men.
How old are your kids?
I have 22 and 19-year-old boys.
Okay. Okay, cool. So, are they both out of the house?
One is, one isn't.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, that's one of the things as a parent, like, you have to get to this place where, my boys are grown. I still, love them with all my heart, but they're grown men. And so they do their own thing. So having dogs is something my wife and I, we just bring so much joy to us, having dogs and playing with them, walking them. They just bring joy to my life.
What kind of dogs do you have?
I've got a Rhodesian Ridgeback and a Boxer.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just so much fun.
Yeah, I love my dogs. I got 2 dogs as well. They're Aussie Doodles, and they're so cute. I mean, they're like my little kids. They're great. And when did you meet your wife?
Like 1999.
1999. Okay, so that was before you started Waltz Construction.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so she's been with you the whole way. She was with you when you were working for the company.
Yes.
Okay. So she's gotten to experience the entire thing. Wow.
She has been on a roller coaster ride. I honestly, there's no good reason she hasn't left me at least half a dozen times.
Right.
But that's honestly, she's one of the things, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but for a large part of my life, I had this, incredibly damaging self-talk about, stupid, worthless, if people really knew who you were, they wouldn't, all that really damaging internal self-talk. And honestly, even though there were multiple times that any reasonable person would have said, no, she'd been totally justified leaving me, divorcing me. The fact that she didn't, it made me have to evaluate myself. Well, maybe I'm not. If this good woman thinks this highly of me, maybe there's something there. So she's kind of been a big part of me getting over the self-destructive self-hatred, because of her unconditional love for me.
Right.
It sort of forced me to address that.
When were you able to get through and address your negative self-talk? How'd you do that?
Yeah.
Because I think, to your point, that's not, you're not the only one.
Yeah.
I think everybody's got the negative self-talk.
What I think is true is when people ask me for, at New Freedom, I'm around in group therapy sessions sometimes, and people ask me, hey, are you in recovery? And my answer is yes, I'm in recovery. But what I'm really in recovery from is self-hatred and self-destructive behavior.
Okay.
Right. Because I feel like that's the root cause of the alcoholism, the drug abuse. I think a lot of the things that most of us do to kill those bad feelings comes from a place of being self-destructive and disliking ourselves.
Right.
So when I realized that was a problem, I was actually listening to the Aubrey Marcus podcast. It was in this phase where I was like, I don't know what to do. I know I have to do something. So reading everything and get my hands on, listening to podcasts, trying to understand how do I start this process of not feeling the way I feel. And the Aubrey Marcus podcast was where I learned of this book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It.
Right.
So I'm listening to this thing and listening to this guy talk about this book and how to love yourself. And I was in such a bad place that I was by myself. The idea of loving myself made me embarrassed.
Wow. Okay.
Right? That's how deep it was. Like, I can't imagine. And so this guy's talking about this book, and you tell yourself that you love yourself, and like the idea of telling myself I love myself was so I can't imagine ever doing that.
Wow.
And so that was what triggered me. And this book is interesting because it's less about the theory. It's more, here's a step by step. How do you do this?
Okay.
Look yourself in the mirror once a day and say these things, and repeat these things to yourself many times. And really, it's like a step by step. And I went from the idea of loving myself being mortifying to the point where I couldn't believe it, to actually doing it was a really big step in stopping the self-hatred.
Yeah. It reminds me, there's a guy named Ward Hickey, and he always says, it doesn't matter how you feel, it only matters what you do. I remember him saying that, I don't know, over 10 years ago. And to your point, it doesn't matter how you feel, it only matters what you do. It's like, here's the step-by-step process.
Yeah.
And you do these things, then you'll start to feel differently.
Yeah. And so I've encouraged a lot of people to get that book and read it. And I think that was a really big
Now, when was that? Was that before pre-sobriety? Was that pre-COVID?
No, it would have been after COVID, probably in between my two ayahuasca retreats.
Okay. And was it a process, or was it an immediate like?
Oh no, it was a process.
Okay.
It was a process.
Okay. Do you ever go back to the the negative self-talk?
No, and in fact, I feel like it's I've flirted with it, so to speak, but I almost instantly go, no, I'm not going back to that. Yeah. I'm not going back to that.
My perception of you and just the energy that you bring, it's like I don't see that.
I've been a master at disguising.
But there's still a frequency, and if you listen to Joe Dispenza, he talks a lot about frequency and energy, and I don't even know if that's correct to say that. But I'm pretty aware, I'm pretty perceptive, and just the way that you carry yourself, I don't see someone who is angry at himself.
Yeah, and I think if you had known me 10 years ago, you would get a distinctly different impression.
Yeah, and I can tell you that even I can tell myself, I attract different people and people respond to me differently than they used to respond to me. And I think, I'm not really much different. It's like, oh no, I am much different.
Yeah.
And thinking about the way that people respond to you, it's probably much different today than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Or 10 years ago.
Yeah. 10 years. I was a wrecking ball 10 years ago.
Right.
And it's, if I'm being frank and honest, I was a destructive force in a lot of people's lives. Mm-hmm. And I think a typical, alcoholic mindset or whatever it is, I was manipulative enough to bring people along, mm-hmm. and rope them in. My gravitational pull would pull people in, mm-hmm. and then I would lead people on, the self-destructive part of what I was doing.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Well, and they're attracted. I mean, the reason why they're attracted to it is because they've got a little bit of that going on themselves as well. It's like you attract what you are.
Yeah. So there are people I've run into who haven't seen me in 15, 20 years, and you seem different.
They're like, wow,
thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
The Matt I used to know wouldn't have done that.
Yep. I get that a lot.
Right. So I remember one of the things that you mentioned when we had coffee at the Henry, you talked about, if I remember correctly, you laying in bed, the thing that was comforting was imagining your death.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about that.
Yeah, that's a tough. I knew whatever, we were having a really unexpected, frank discussion.
Right.
Like I didn't come into having coffee with you thinking I can't wait to bare my soul to Tim. I'm going to tell him all these things. It just,
right.
It just sort of happened, and it felt, natural and good. And it was,
mm-hmm.
it was a great discussion. I mean, frankly, I don't know if I've told anyone else that.
Okay. So you're on the spot.
Yeah. And it's fine. Yeah. No, I was in such a bad mental space that it was almost like my reward to myself for getting through another day was imagining my death. Like that was the thing.
That is so wild.
Yeah. No, it was such, and and now it's the opposite. When I lay in bed and I'm drifting off to sleep, I'm thinking about positive things and what's going right and being grateful. Mm-hmm. And it's the inverse of what I did for probably a couple of decades. And, it felt like a double life.
Okay.
Because I've got, young kids and a wife and businesses, and I've got to be on. Mm-hmm. And, I think while this was really challenging, I didn't let myself off the hook for being a good father. Mm-hmm. So I coached Little League, and I taught wrestling to the kids, and, and I was really involved in their lives. And so it was like I held myself together for that part of it. Mm-hmm. And then when I was done with that, I would really devolve into this self-destructive, self-hatred mentality. Yeah. And it was I look back on those days and I go, I don't know how. It was like each day was a little bit worse than the one before.
Did your wife know? No. So you just kept it all in?
I just carried it. I just carried it. And that was what, led to drinking myself stupid, mm-hmm. every chance I got, mm-hmm. just trying to kill those feelings.
Right.
And, it was interesting because I think entrepreneurially, part of those feelings, as strange as this is, it's what drove me in business. The mistaken belief that, well, maybe if I can just have success.
Yeah. If I succeed, people will like me.
Well, these feelings will stop.
Okay. Yeah.
I can prove to myself. Maybe I'm not worthless and useless and stupid and all the things I was telling myself. If I just can have financial success, I'll feel better. I learned the hard way that that's not the case.
Right.
You can have all the financial success in the world and still go to sleep wishing you would die.
Right. Well, I think this is good for people to hear because you're a successful entrepreneur, and on the outside, you had a lot of good things going on.
Sure.
Right. You're married. You have kids. You're coaching your kids wrestling. You're coaching your kids Little League. You have Waltz Construction. You've got your dispensary. You've got a few other businesses. You're making money. Yeah.
On paper.
On paper.
Oh man, that guy looks like he's doing all right.
Right. But inside. Yeah.
It's one of the things that I try to bring when I get a chance to talk to the members at New Freedom. One of the things I really want them to know is like, it's great to have financial aspirations, and you should go out and do the best you can in the world. Don't fool yourself into thinking that's going to make you feel better. Right. The truth is, these two things are independent. You need to work on yourself.
Right.
And I think it starts with the more honest you can be with yourself, the better of a chance you have at getting some happiness is probably an overused term. I don't think we can all. Happiness is not a goal. I think is attainable, but fulfillment, and I think fulfillment comes from working on yourself and being the best person you can be. And then if you also happen to have financial success, great. But I really encourage people not to link those two together, because you're just going to set yourself up for a really big disappointment if that happens.
Right. Yeah, I think they say as long as you make enough money to live and pay your bills, that beyond that, more money doesn't make you happier.
Right.
And I think for me, it's just fulfillment is doing the next right thing, not being an asshole, being honest, don't lie, cheat, steal. Mm-hmm. Like keep my side of the street clean, because I got to feel good about my behavior. If I feel good about my behavior, that's the most important thing for me. That's my path to fulfillment.
Yep.
That's been my experience. So how has your perspective on business and leadership changed since you stopped drinking?
It's a good question. I think for me, it's been just a little bit more the blocking and tackling, the basics. It's easy when you've been in the business world for a long time, and I've, had 4 or 5 startups that I've started. Sometimes you feel like, okay, let's get to the real fancy, let's do the fancy stuff.
Right.
And I think, having the clarity of the past 15 months has really taught me, no, let's really focus on it's the basics, it's the blocking and tackling. It's making sure that we're handling, the inane details, watching every dollar. I think part of my challenge, my own personal challenge with business was I was really solid on going out and bringing the money in. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really solid on spending it very wisely and watching every dollar on the way out.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's probably consistent with, chemically dependent people.
Right.
It's way more fun to go out and make the money.
Yeah.
It's way less fun to worry about where every dollar is going and spending it wisely.
Right.
So I think maybe that's, if I could concisely say it, it's putting those two things together now. Yes. Be in a position to go out and make the right things happen and bring the money in, but let's be really diligent and intelligent and responsible about where it's going after that.
Have you noticed that your team looks at you differently since you've kind of changed your perspective a little bit?
Yes. Yeah, no, it's apparent.
How so?
Just, I think in my demeanor, I'm much calm. Like, I used to be a little more, excited, like rambunctious and, excited and, mm-hmm. Kind of one of those types of leaders. And I think now I'm more, meat and potato, like basic. I think about, for me, my life, like my grandfather, I think about him and he was really solid, always was connected and intelligent and, really had his bases covered. And I feel like I'm emulating him a little bit more and mm-hmm. really trying to be the calming presence, taking things, being discerning and intelligent about decision making and, not wanting to quick fire decisions and be a fast mover, saying, no, let's slow down and think about this and make the right decisions instead of just, all right, on to the next thing.
So with New Freedom, you've created a unique environment to support individuals re-entering society from the justice system. What inspired you to start this organization, and how has your own experience influenced its mission?
So I never imagined I was going to be in behavioral health, specializing in prison reentry.
Right.
And not because I had any aversion to it.
Right.
I just never imagined that.
Right.
I didn't know anything about the behavioral health business. I'd been around, the way I'd been around the medical world was by building facility, but not really knowing anything about how things worked.
Right.
So there were 3 guys who had this idea for New Freedom. They made the rounds, talking to people, trying to raise money, talking to banks. And one of them was formerly incarcerated. They actually developed some of the programs for New Freedom inside the prison.
Okay.
Right? There was some curriculum. There were some classes being taught inside prison. Mm-hmm. My partner, who was formerly incarcerated, got released, there were a couple of guys from the recovery world who were supporting this effort in prison. And when my partner got released, the three of them got together and said, hey, let's really scale this up, what we were doing, and do some real good. So they went out, to some banks. And I lovingly tell the story, like they went to 3 or 4 banks. Banks said, great idea. No fucking way am I giving an ex-convict and 2 ex-addicts any money.
Right.
Because banks are in the business of avoiding risk, and that doesn't sound like avoiding risk to them.
Right.
So eventually one of the bankers said, I got some guys you should meet. These guys got introduced to me and another business associate of mine. Mm-hmm. They presented this idea, and I just couldn't understand why it didn't already exist.
Okay.
As an entrepreneur, when I'm opening a business, one of the first things I want to know is, well, why isn't someone smarter, better looking, richer than me already doing this? Mm-hmm. And in this instance, there didn't seem to be a facility like what New Freedom was aiming at.
Right.
So what I found, we put this idea together. We went out to, talk to some fund managers, ESG funds and the like. And at the time, ESG was what seemed like a perfect fit. You want to do, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. They want to do good in the community for underserved individuals. It seemed like a great fit. And we would leave every meeting with an ESG fund. Like those guys didn't seem to want to do anything with convicts.
Okay.
They were thinking like puppies and children, not, there's almost like this distasteful look on people's faces when they talked about ex-convicts.
Okay.
And so I think what I started to realize is I think that maybe is why a New Freedom doesn't exist. Is because there's kind of this mindset that they're ex-convict. Look, they get what they deserve. They did bad things. They hurt people, and so that really encouraged, if that was the answer, then I was really encouraged. Mm-hmm. And so with that, we found our facility, was a Sheraton 4 Points on Peoria and I-17. Mm-hmm. This coronavirus thing again had just happened. So they were on lockdown. Mm-hmm. So it's an empty hotel.
Okay.
We walk in and they're basically begging us to buy it.
Okay. Wow.
And they sold it to us for pennies on the dollar for what we really could have gotten it for. Yeah. And on top of that, they let us move in right away. Like we had a letter of intent and they let us move in.
Wow.
We took 6 months to finalize a purchase sale agreement, the PSA, and people were moving in. We were programming in there. Like during that 6 months, we were operating New Freedom. I've never seen anything like it.
Wow.
Never seen anything like it.
How quickly did you fill up?
It was probably a year, maybe 14 months before we really, started clicking on all cylinders. And so the interesting thing for me about, this prison reentry opportunity is, I grew up rough. I grew up in a part of Tempe that's pretty, it's the lower middle class section of Tempe. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of drugs and there were gangs and there was violence. And I was around a lot of, tough things as a kid. And a lot of the guys I looked up to went to prison.
Okay.
And for a decent amount of my young adulthood, I kind of assumed I was going to end up in prison. Mm-hmm. And in fact, should have. I mean, there were times when I was in the car with the drugs and the money and a gun, pulled over by the police. And just because the policeman chose not to search the car, I mean, all the signs were there. It doesn't make any sense why he wouldn't have pulled us out and go, what are you guys up to? Let me take a look. But he just didn't.
Wow.
And if that had happened, certainly I would have been serving a long prison sentence. But, my life took a fork in the road, and I was away from that for so long, I kind of forgot my roots. Mm. And when this opportunity for New Freedom came up, it sort of triggered all these memories. Like, yeah, you know what? This does touch me because I was in this world, and guys like Steve Judson. I watched Steve go in and out of prison as a kid, and he was a guy I looked up to, and so it's the irony of it all that Steve was one of our first employees.
Yeah,
that's just such a great. For me, it's one of the things I'm really proud of that Steve has become the person that he is today, and he has such an impact at our facility, and things have come full circle. So that's been really one of the more enjoyable things for me is watching how New Freedom has succeeded, and a big part of the success is that over 200 employees, 85% of them are formerly incarcerated, formerly addicted. Mm-hmm. So it's the people who have changed their lives and been successful who are helping the people that don't quite know how to do that yet get there. And it's just beautiful to watch how that has happened, the lives that we've touched, and, no matter what happens in the future, getting to be a part of this for the past 5 years has been the most important thing that I've had a chance to be a part of.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. It's such a beautiful thing and I can relate. And I'm just sitting here thinking about me growing up as well. I've got some friends that went down the wrong path, and I feel so lucky, like you. I feel so lucky that I was able to get away, and I ended up going to college at UC Davis, 400 miles away from my home. So that was kind of the way that I was able to separate myself from my friends, because they went down the path that I'm grateful that I didn't go down, and I got lucky too. So I can relate to that. So with New Freedom, like what do you see in the future for New Freedom?
So we had our first facility at Pure and I-17, and that has room for about 400 people. When we started, it was both men and women.
Okay.
And, that was, we debated, is that right? Is it wrong? And we kind of landed on, well, we're talking about re-entering society. It turns out that both men and women are in society.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's do this. It was a challenge for all the reasons you can imagine.
Right.
So we decided, okay, let's do a women's only facility. So we've opened our women's facility.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. So that's at basically I-17 and the 101.
Okay. So you have another facility now.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we have two facilities.
And how long ago did the women's facility open?
It's been open about 4 months.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess my hope for New Freedom is getting the word out. I was on the Dr. Drew podcast about a month ago.
Right.
And really what I want to do is I want the general public to know that there are good things happening in the world. Mm-hmm. And, I can't think of something that I can personally do that has more impact than helping people leave the self-destructive life of crime behind and successfully re-enter society and become good neighbors, good husbands, good wives, good brothers, good, that to me, that feels like it's helping our city, our county, our state at a grassroots level. Mm-hmm. So what I would love is for the general public to know that this program exists, the work we're doing, and to want New Freedom to come into their state. Mm-hmm. Almost every state in the country, I think, could benefit from having a successful reentry program. And so we're reaching out to different states. We're trying to, get the connections necessary for states around the country who, like, do you have an incarcerated population? Yes. Are you having success reentering? No. Okay. We would love to help with that.
Right.
And so what I would love to see 15 or 20 New Freedom facilities around the country in the next 10 years.
Right. Yeah. That'd be amazing. Well, I know that you're out kind of doing some of your work and laying the foundation. So you've started with a successful program here in Arizona. How many people have you helped?
I think the last count I saw, it's been about 6,500 people who have been through our doors.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Over 5 years.
Okay. So let's see here. Let me go look at my questions. So sobriety is a continuous journey with its own challenges. Do you ever find yourself wishing you could have a drink, and how do you handle those moments?
Yes. The answer is yes. And, I'm just continuing to hold myself accountable. I made a deal with myself that I'm sticking to, and sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's tough, but there's plenty of days when I go, I would love an escape from this stress. And, that to me, that's what gets me there. It's not, I think some people go like, oh man, I used to have such a fun time drinking. And, that after the, 10 or 15 years of drinking, like the fun kind of went away. Mm-hmm. It really was the stress relief, the break from the pressure that I really needed, that was attractive to me. So that's still the case. There are still days like, oh man, I would love to just kill this pressure for a few minutes, and I just don't. And
what helps you make the decision not to have a drink?
I guess it's a little bit of fear of like, I don't want to break what I've done. Mm-hmm. I don't want to break this commitment to myself. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that helps me is, an old friend of mine said, listen, you don't have to say it's gonna be forever. It's just for today.
Yeah.
And so I that just for today is what comes in my head a lot. Yep, not today. Okay.
Just for today.
Just get through.
And I can revisit tomorrow.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for someone that's trying to get sober? What suggestions?
I think it's probably the same thing I tell a lot of people, no matter what maybe you're struggling with. And I think finding a way to be honest with yourself maybe is a really important thing that I would challenge people to start trying to do. It was the hardest thing for me, being honest with myself. Like, I mean, I spent decades and decades and decades avoiding the truth. I mean, I was a black belt in avoidance,
right?
Because I didn't want to, like, anytime these thoughts come up, and I don't want to think about it. You know, I could easily push those thoughts away. I mean, I think being honest with yourself is a foundation for whatever you're struggling with, whether it's sobriety, you know, alcohol, drugs, general self-destructive behavior. I think one of the basic needs is to find a way to be honest with yourself about what's really going on and why you're doing the things you're doing. And for me, that it just helped me clarify what exactly I need to work on and why.
Right. Yeah. And I think awareness comes as a result of sobriety. And if I'm drinking, I'm not even able to be aware. I don't even know. I don't even know how to be honest with myself.
So somehow I found a way, even though I was still drinking, I still found a way to challenge myself to be honest, you know, and really it's holding yourself accountable for the bullshit. Yeah. For the cop outs, I know when I'm copping out. Like, I try to convince myself that's not the case, but I know it.
Right.
And when I hold myself accountable, I go, no, you're taking the easy way out.
Right.
Stop that. Yeah. And so when I can do that, when I can stop taking the cop out and taking the easy way out, life gets harder, but it gets better.
Is there anything I missed? Anything that you wanted me to ask, or anything that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. You got more than I intended.
Okay. No, okay. That's good.
You did a great job. You're a great interviewer.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So tell people that want to learn more about New Freedom or learn more about you. Where can they find you? Where can they go?
Sure. To learn more about New Freedom, our website is newfreedomaz.com. And I think they've done a great job. You know, you can learn about it if any of you listening have family or friends who may be incarcerated, are looking for a change, don't know what to do. You know, New Freedom can be a great solution for people currently in Arizona.
What about people that don't have insurance?
Insurance is, you know, that's the way we fund our facility. Okay. So insurance is going to be a precursor. That doesn't mean we absolutely won't take people that don't have the means.
Right. You know, or will you help them figure out how to get insurance if they don't have insurance?
Sure. And so the primary demographic that we're helping are people leaving incarceration.
Okay.
So what we're doing, you know, when they're in prison, when they're getting ready to leave prison, they get signed up for, you know, their insurance plan. Mm-hmm. So generally people who are leaving prison are in a position, you know, to come to New Freedom. Mm-hmm. And what we've got is a large group of what we call mentors who are writing like almost 7,000 letters a month. Okay. To people incarcerated. So that's one of the ways, one of the reasons that New Freedom has success is because we're building relationships with people while they're incarcerated, sometimes up to 2 years prior to their release. Right. So if you know someone who's looking for a change and they're incarcerated in Arizona, you know, reach out to New Freedom. We'd love to mentor them. And we mentor people who don't come to New Freedom. Okay. It's not about, you know, it's really about helping people get better and successfully reenter, no matter whether they come to New Freedom, maybe they come to Camelback Recovery. You know, there's a whole bunch of resources that exist that we just want to, our mission is to help people have success and live the life that they want. Right. And regardless of whether they come to New Freedom or not.
Right. Yeah. And I we were talking to Nina earlier, and we've had 9 people from New Freedom that went through New Freedom. So they were incarcerated. They went to New Freedom. They went through your program. And then we hired them as house managers, and they were longtime house managers with us. So it's like just getting to see that progression and getting to see people get well, essentially, has been awesome. So
and I guess the last thing I'll say, if you're listening to this and you're not in Arizona and you would like New Freedom or a New Freedom type facility in your area, talk to your state legislators, talk to your governor's office, tell them that a solution exists to help solve this problem.
Awesome. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up our show. We had a great conversation. Matt, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. And
thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise. And to our listeners, thanks again for watching. And I will see you on the next episode.
If you got value from this video, if you heard what you needed to hear, be sure to like it. Comment if you've got a question or you have something to say. Subscribe to the channel. Camelback Recovery provides treatment services for people struggling with mental health, mental illness, addiction, alcoholism, whatever it may be. So if you or a loved one is struggling and you need some guidance and you need some direction, reach out to us. Our contact information is down below, or you can go to our website, camelbackrecovery.com, whether it be detox, inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment, sober living, recovery coaching, sober companion services, whatever it may be. Like I said, we can either help you or make sure that you get sent in the right direction. We help people all over the country, all over the world for that matter. I'll see you on the next video.